welcome to everyone who is attending today. We're eager to share with you our experience with getting some solar panels for our home.
So to introduce ourselves first, this is Jim Ruebush. I'm Melanie McNeil. We live in Coralville. And as he just said, that we're going to talk about the solar panels that we've had installed. And, you know, first question, I suppose, would be, why would we want solar panels? And in fact, if we want them, why would we do that now? So it's pretty simple. Those of you who have paid attention over the last many years to the issues of climate change, renewable energies really are a way that we as humans can help mitigate or reduce our influence on climate change and help keep the Earth a safe place for many generations into the future. So we wanted to do, if we could, what we can to reduce our carbon footprint and make our contribution to the world a better thing. So solar is one part of that. Well, why now? A few years ago, we looked into having a solar installation done. We didn't look at it very seriously because the first thing that we saw several years ago, and I'm thinking 2011 or 12, that the price really was going to be pretty exorbitant. We were looking at $25,000 to $30,000 for an installation. And so frankly, that just didn't make financial sense for us at the time, and we didn't pursue it more. But recently there have been some changes. Of course, the price has come down substantially in the market for solar installations, and that was a big part of looking at it again. Our next door neighbors had a solar installation done about a year and a half ago, and they've been quite pleased with it. And one more thing is, when we looked at it also in the past, we were told that the part of our roof structure that would be the best angle for installation was simply too small. We didn't have the right angle of roof for it. It wasn't going to work out well.
Or size.
And the size, it was just going to be too small. And so being inspired by seeing a handful of installations that were ground-based instead of roof-based, we thought, well, why not? Let's check into that again. So that's sort of the why now answer.
Our installation was done by Moxie Solar of North Liberty. We approached them about a year ago in July last year and talked to them about it. A representative came out to evaluate our site to see if it was okay. We wanted the ground-mounted system, as Melanie said. The representative was able to give us a quote that very day. He went outside and measured the area around the yard and the side of the house. It's a sloping part of the yard. He wanted to make sure there was enough distance between the panels and the next door neighbor property. So all of those things were carefully looked at. He gave us a quote that day. They handled all of the paperwork that was needed. There are forms that are needed for permission from the city and permission from the utility company to proceed with installation. There were inspections that were needed after certain things were done. Submitted forms to the state to be able to get tax credits. All of that was handled by the people with Moxie. So we would get an email occasionally that would ask for our signature and approval on certain things. So those were very easily done. We paid half of the total cost on the day that the representative was here, and we said yes to the plan. And then we paid the balance at the end of the project. So it was July when we met with them and we paid our first deposit, and it was October when they came to do the installation. Now at this time, if you're interested in a purchase for solar panels, what is called Solarize Johnson County is offering a program now. The group purchase program will bring down some costs, and the installation is done by a company that's different from Moxie Solar, but they are local enough so that they'll be able to handle all of the details. So if you're interested, that's Solarize Johnson County. You can look that up on the internet. Let's take a satellite view of our house. You can see on the right side is the front of the house and the driveway and the curving sidewalk up to the front door. And the part of the roof line that's at the bottom of the picture is the south-facing roof line. It's this triangular section. When we originally approached Moxie about putting panels on the house, this was all that they said would be advisable. The part on the front of the house faced kind of northeast, and that really didn't make sense. The part on the west side of the house, on the left, that is shaded quite a bit by some trees that are farther to the left. And then the north part is back here. That wouldn't make sense to put panels. So we chose to put a ground-mounted system next to the house, and there are 8 panels that would be placed here. One issue that we had was that on the opposite side of the house, on the north side, is where the meter is located. So the challenge was, how do you get the electric energy from the panels over to the meter? You can't go around the front because you can't build a trench there because the driveway is in the way. So they needed to make a trench from the meters around 3 sides of the house following this yellow path over to the array. Back here in the back, we have some trees. There's some roots of trees. And there was a drainage line from the back of the house. So they had to make sure that they could manage those. So we saw that they brought this machine in. This slow-moving tractor has a knife blade that's about 18 inches long. Down in the bottom part of the picture, you can see part of that knife blade. It's sharp and it's about 18 inches long and it vibrates very fast. The housing that's above it, right in the center of the picture, has inside a off-center weight, and it spins around very rapidly and causes a lot of vibration for the knife blade down below. The knife blade tip, which we can't see in the picture right here, is attached to a chain, and the chain is attached to a heavy gauge, flexible black plastic tube. And that tube is going to be pulled through the ground by this machine. Now I'll just let it run. It takes about 15 or 20 seconds. As you might see, and I hope it showed properly for you, this black plastic tube is being pulled into the ground a good foot or more below the surface of the ground. And the ground is just knifed through, and it doesn't leave a lot of dirt. It doesn't leave a trench that's been dug. Right. That's so the extent of the video that wasn't going to leave a mark. Here's the other end. After going around 3 sides of the house, they left several feet of the black plastic tubing extending up. The panels were going to be installed right next to that. And this tubing is what will carry some heavy gauge copper wire to deliver the electric energy from the panels around to the meter. Now, one issue we had that we wanted to be observant of was we have a little garden plot here, and we wanted to make sure that the panels weren't going to shade that. So they were going to be built far enough out from the house to be able to give sunlight to the garden. So that's been successful.
Yeah, I'm going to just hop in here and say that one of the things about this side of our house is this wouldn't work for everyone, but because of the slope of the yard, it really isn't play space for small children or particularly good for gardening, except in the terracing right next to the house. So while for us, it's certainly no loss at all to have our yard space used for having the panels installed. For some people, that would be a lot of space that they would feel like they lost.
The next day or two, hardware was delivered, and on the left picture you can see the hardware was delivered, just placed in the yard. This was going to be the material which the panels would be built upon. Two pieces of the hardware that you can see lying in the center are two long I-beams, and those needed to be driven into the ground as the support structure. On the picture on the right, we have a machine that was brought to our site, and this machine was going to be brought into the yard, and it would push the two I-beams into the ground. Here's the machine being brought across the yard, and I'm not sure if the video is slow to catch up or what, but so the guy drove it across the yard. It really didn't do much damage. So they delivered the machine across the yard. They positioned it where the panels were going to be installed, and they carefully located it. They put up surveying equipment so that they could get a very level line and be able to get the direction of everything proper. So the two guys worked quite a while to get this arranged. And then this last video that I hope we'll be able to watch, I'll give it a moment to load up. The guy who's in the orange shirt is going to take one of the I-beams and guide it into position on the machine. And then there's a man over here on the left, in the lower left, that's sitting in the machine, and he's the operator, and he can position everything just right over some flags that he positioned on the ground, and the machine would push these into the ground very vertically.
So they've got it in position, and they're going to start ramming it down into the ground. So there's no concrete fill. There's no digging that's been done. It just gets thrust directly into the ground.
So what we ended up with were two posts into the ground, vertical, the right distance apart, and ready to be built upon. Within a day or two, a crew showed up, and their job was to put together the assembly on top of the posts and be able to mount the 8 solar panels onto that framework. That took about half a day. I went out to the street to see what it looked like from the street. It's not very noticeable. The greenery and the shrubbery around will be adding a little bit more to hide them, and it seems to match up with the roof line reasonably well. So some people have visited and said hello, and they haven't even noticed them, so I don't think they're very noticeable. So this is the finished product. The garden is not shaded badly, and up here on the side of the wall is a fireplace vent, and that's not interfering with it, and the panels don't interfere with the 4 windows that we have in our living room. So you can't see it at all from indoors. Underneath the panels, there's electronics that deliver the electricity produced to the small box that's at the top of this post in the foreground, at the top of the picture. You can perhaps see some wire mesh netting that's also underneath the panels. That keeps squirrels and birds from getting up in here and causing damage and nesting. Next question is, how do they perform? So this is October. October 8th is when we got them turned on. And as you can see, there's a red plot line, which is panel production. So during the daytime when the sun's out, they were producing electricity. This is a plot that's available on my cell phone or from an application on the computer. So I can look at them at any time and see how they're producing electricity and how well they're having an effect on our usage. So every day that each day the sun is out enough, we get a large amount of electricity produced. Some days are sunny, some days are not. So you get a lot of variation from day to day in the amount of electricity produced. These numbers that you see here are the first 6 days of production. 5.97 is 5.97 kilowatt hours. Now you may wonder, what in the world is a kilowatt hour? A kilowatt hour is an energy unit of electric energy. Let me give you an example. Suppose you were going to iron some clothes and you check on the bottom of the iron and it says 1,000 watts. That's a kilowatt. If you turn on that iron and leave it turned on for 1 whole hour, you have used 1 kilowatt hour of electric energy. How much does that cost? Well, for us, it's about 10.7 cents. So less than 11 cents for each kilowatt hour. The panels in October on those days were producing these quantities of electric energy. If you look at the production in a different way, these are charts of the panels production throughout the day. In the lower left of each chart line is when they started turning on earlier in the morning. And then the sun shines on them and you get a rising level and a high peak. If there's clouds or shade, the quantity goes down. It varies throughout the day. And as you can see, each of those 4 days that I've shown charted have very different signatures for how much production there was. Some days are cloudy, some days are overcast, some days are very bright and sunny. The one in the lower right is there's a lot of good sun in the morning and in the afternoon, but right in the middle of the day, there's this low place. That's because my next door neighbor has a tree, and in October it was shading the panels. So that's an issue before the sun gets high enough in the sky for us. As we looked at the panel production in January, February, and March, we were seeing a steady increase. Now you notice that the graphing line varies a lot because each day was different cloudiness and sunniness. But in looking at the maximum numbers, they were growing steadily. We were getting up close to values of about 15 kilowatt hours. Now, how does that compare to what our house needs in a day? Our house needs around 10 kilowatt hours in the wintertime. So the panels were beginning to produce enough electricity to be more than our house needed on many of the days. And this chart shows the panels production since we got them until last week. And you can see that they've steadily risen up close to 20, and they've come down a little bit in the summertime. It's fun to watch this and look at it on my phone application. Melanie kids me about doing that all the time. But I've been a science teacher for my whole life, and so this is a lot of fun. I enjoy it. The star represents the highest value that we were ever able to produce so far. It was on a day when the sun was shining as directly on the panels, and it was very clear like today. So it was our best day. Now, one of the things that we have going on with our panels is something called net metering. What is that? The grid supplies all of the homes and businesses around the country with electric energy. The meter on the side of our house is called a smart meter, and it monitors the grid usage for our house as well as the solar panel output. And every day the meter finds the net amount by subtracting the panel's production from the energy that our house has used. So we end up with a net amount of electricity that we will be billed for on each day. Those daily net amounts are tallied up for our monthly bills. Now that's the way our utility with Lynn County Rural Electric Cooperative does it. It may be done in a slightly different way by other utilities. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into that very closely, but that's the way ours does it with Lynn County. I've got 3 different periods of time to share with you. This is the net metering on a daily basis from October through December. There's a lot going on in the chart here. There's a graph line that is blue. It's across the top of the chart. And that is the energy consumed by our house. It's what we take from the grid. And then there's a red line across the bottom. That's the panel production during this period of time. It wasn't very strong in November or December. It's pretty good in October. And then the purple, those are the net amounts of energy that go toward our electric bill. And in October, the net amounts were not too high. They were around 5 in many cases on the chart. And then in November and December, the net amounts went up. The furnace was running more often. We had lights on more often. And the low sun angle and winter clouds reduced the effectiveness of the panels. The next period of time is January through March. January was a pathetic month for making solar energy. It was very cloudy. The sun is not very high in the sky. By February, we started seeing a change, and our net amounts were going down. And by March, we were seeing several net amounts that were in negative territory. Those were to our benefit. Our electric bill was being reduced on those days, and we were even making more electricity than we needed. So that electricity that we don't need in the house gets distributed out to the grid for other people to use. We don't store it on our property in a battery system. That can be done by some, but we are not doing that. It's too costly for us. And finally, the net metering for April through June. The solar panel production, the red line at the bottom, is quite robust, and our house use was less than 10 most of the time. Not much air conditioning was needed, and we get more sunlight, so fewer lights were on. So we had a lot of offsetting of our household use. The net amounts were quite low in the negative range. So this is a good display for us. It really shows that the panels were doing their job. And our final chart shows the effect over the year to date. Now the dark line at the top, this is January on the left and mid-year and December on the right. The top line is 15-year average for our electric energy use. I've kept track of this and gotten numbers from our utility company that shows our past history.
Yeah, I just want to point out that Jim has actually kept log of our energy use and billing for well more than the last 15 years, but this is what he had on hand easily. So it's just a thing for him.
It's fun. I like it. I like doing it. So in the wintertime, over here on the upper left, our total kilowatt hours for a month are almost 600 kilowatt hours. And if you follow that line, you get down into May and it's down to about 300. So a lot less electric energy used historically for us. And then in the summer, air conditioner use goes up. So the electric energy use goes up and then drops in the fall and then goes back up again in October, November, and December. Our average for 15 years or more has been about 400 kilowatt hours a month. The other graph line, the orange one, is this year with solar panels being used. So this is the net electric energy from the utility company that we're billed for. It was significantly reduced in January and February, even more so in March and April and May. And in June, we had a value that was even negative, which meant we made more electricity in all of June than we needed. So it reduced our utility cost to nothing. We still had to pay some of the hookup fee to be connected to the electric utility, but they reduced it too with our production. So July is here at the end of the chart. We've been using the air conditioner, and so the utility bill we just got a few days ago has gone back up again a little. I don't expect it to go much higher, and then in the fall, I expect it to drop down and maybe go into the negative areas again. So we're really pleased with the way this has been performing. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the year and how it goes. Each year is going to be a little bit different, but as you probably suspect, I'll be keeping track and making a chart of it. So we have a few final thoughts here and questions. The panels are having a large effect on our electric net usage. They're meeting our expectations. Will they pay for themselves in a reasonable amount of time? And is that really important to us? I think what Melanie said early on in our talk is that what is important to us is that we do something that can offset our carbon footprint and make the future for our children and grandchildren a little better. If everyone could do that, I think that would be wonderful. And then the last question is, what effect will the panels have on the value of our home if and when we decide to sell? You have some thoughts on that, Melanie?
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the financial part of making this decision in the first place. Probably many of you probably wonder, well, how much does this cost? Is this even something that is a reasonable go for us? And for us, for the installation we had, again, with the very, very particular to our site and to our needs, our site-specific installation on the ground, which would be different than if it were on a roof. All of that, the panels and installation, was $10,080. That included the deposit that we paid on the day that we signed the contract, as well as the remainder that we paid when the installation was finished. So that was all just over $10,000. We were eligible for a federal tax credit of 30% of that. And we went ahead and claimed that on our 2019 taxes that we filed early in 2020. And that was 30%, or just over $3,000. The state tax credit at the time was 15%. Obviously, tax laws are always subject to change. So, you know, if you look into this, I can't guarantee that these will be the numbers you'll face. But at 15%, that will amount to $1,512 for us. Now, the state budgets a particular amount, a pot of money for paying out these tax credits each year. And we were already too late in the year with our filing for it to go in for our 2019 taxes, but we will be able to claim it for our 2020 taxes or into the future as many years as needed to go ahead and reclaim our 15%. So our net cost is $5,544. Our estimated annual benefit, I put here $300 to $500, as Jim already mentioned. We don't know. I mean, we can only guess what that will be. It will depend on what type of cloud cover there is in a particular year, how hot it is, how much air conditioning we use. If we have a house full of people for 3 weeks that use a lot more energy, we just don't know what the number will be. But just a spitballing estimate, $300 to $500 a year. So the estimated payback period, 11 to 18 years. Now, Jim had his career as a science teacher. I had my career as a financial investment manager. I would tell you that usually an estimated payback period of 11 to 18 years wouldn't be considered a particularly good payback. But the financial considerations, of course, are not the only aspect here. And one more thing to visit, what about the estimated impact on home value? Again, this might differ somewhat for different homes. The two respected long-term realtors that we spoke with about it both told us that appraisers are generally putting the impact on home value at 0, that some people are glad to have the solar panels and wouldn't necessarily pay extra for it. Some people are not necessarily pleased about it, but on average it washes to about a 0 impact for home value. So the really important part, the part that doesn't show up in our personal finances, is what are we doing to make the world a better place? And from the October 8th, when our panels were turned on, through the end of the billing period at the end of our July bill last week, we used approximately, I should say we had showed that we had produced approximately 2,000 kilowatt hours of electricity from the panels over that time period. And Jim found a great source of information that shows the source here at the bottom of the slide, greenhouse gas equivalencies calculator from the EPA, and it shows what that actually amounts to. Our 2,000 kilowatt hours of energy that were produced by our own panels over that time period produced the equivalent of 1.5 tons of carbon dioxide that has not been emitted into the atmosphere. So round of applause, everybody, right? Alternative equivalent, 3,500 miles driven by the average car. Now, we didn't drive that much this year.
No.
So we're not going anywhere. I don't know about you, but we're not going anywhere. But most years that would be a portion of a year's mileage, and 3,500 miles equivalent driven. 160 gallons of gasoline, 1,600 pounds of coal burned, 58 propane gas tanks that you might use for your home barbecue, or I love this number, 180,000 smartphones charged. So in essence, I think even in this short period of time, we have gotten our payback simply from having made that much effect on our carbon footprint.
I noticed in the chat window that a person from Moxie, Mary Audia, who has said that currently there is a 26% federal assistance and 13% state of Iowa with a $5,000 maximum. Next year, 22% and 11%, and then gone. Approximately 4% of home value is what she estimated through the Moxie office. So the numbers are changing. I wish that there would be more support for people going ahead and doing solar.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Say hi to Dominic. That's it.